Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all doing super well. So welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about what happened to 16-year-old Yoshihiro Hattori. This case truly broke me. What happened to Yoshihiro truly moved me. So I just want to make this video to continue to spread awareness on his story and to let people know that things like this can happen to anybody. One night, Yoshihiro and his friend were heading to a Halloween party when they accidentally arrived to the wrong house. And when they knocked on that door, their lives would change forever. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Thank you guys again so much for being here and listening to Yoshihiro's story. I truly appreciate all the support, and if you guys are new, welcome, bienvenidos. Hopefully you guys can hit the subscribe button down below so you guys can join the familia. Also, don't forget to turn on your notifications, por favor, so you guys can get notified anytime I upload a new video. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Let's jump right into today's video. Yoshihiro Hattori was born on November 22nd, 1975 in Nagoya, Japan. He was born to parents Maisa and Meiko Hattori and was a middle child. He had a brother and a sister. Yoshi's family described him as a gregarious teen who was friendly, loving, and kind to everyone that he met. He had a very outgoing personality. He 100% was an extrovert, so he loved meeting new people and going on new adventures. In high school, Yoshi was a member of the rugby team, which he really enjoyed doing, and he was also an avid fisher. Now, everyone says that Yoshi was fascinated with America. He had always wanted to travel to the United States to learn the language and meet new people. So he decided to apply for an exchange program that allowed him to travel to the United States, attend school, and stay with the host family for a year. This program was through the American Field Service, also known as AFS, which is a worldwide exchange organization for young people. So he decided to submit an application into the program, not really thinking much about it. He wasn't too confident that he was going to get accepted into the program, but he thought to himself, what's the harm in applying? As part of his application process, Yoshi had to submit an entrance paper, and in this paper he wrote, "Wherever I go, I wish I could make the country a second home country. I can make Japanese cooking, like tempura cutlet for host families, and introduce the living way of Japanese." And to his surprise, Yoshi was accepted into the program. He also received a scholarship for this trip, so he was so excited to go to the United States, to learn, to study, to meet new people, and just have this once-in-a-lifetime experience. Of course, he was a bit nervous to leave his family. I mean, he was only 16 years old at this point. So imagine leaving your family to go to a new country, a foreign land, where you don't really know the language, you don't know anybody, and you're leaving your entire family behind in Japan. It's definitely a huge change, and even though Yoshi was nervous about this, he knew that this is something that he truly wanted to do. So fast forward to the summer of 1992. Yoshi was getting everything ready to head off to the United States and begin this new chapter of his life. With these exchange programs, I'm not sure if students get to choose where they go. Maybe you put a couple of options of, countries that you would like to visit or, states you would like to stay in. So I'm not really sure if this was the choice that he had made, but he was set to go live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Yoshi was going to be staying with the host family that consisted of Dr. Hattori Haymaker, a physician, and her husband Richard Haymaker, a physicist. The couple had hosted exchange students in the past. I believe Yoshi was their third exchange student in the past 5 years, so they did have experience doing this, and they also had a son named Webb, who was the same age as Yoshi, so they would be going to the same school together, and the goal was that Webb and Yoshi would become friends and, just have a good experience together. So now that everything was set in place, Yoshi said goodbye to his family in Japan and headed off to Dallas, Texas. Once he landed in Dallas, the Haymaker family was there to greet him, and together they drove Yoshi to his new home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Holly says that immediately after meeting Yoshi, he had made a huge impression on her. She said that he was such a free spirit and was a complete extrovert. He wasn't shy or quiet towards the family, and as soon as he started school at McKinley High School, he was quickly meeting new people and making friends. The Haymaker's son, Webb, also agreed with his parents and said that Yoshi had an appetite for life, for new experiences, and for making friends. The two bonded immediately, and Webb was a little bit of an introvert, so Yoshi was definitely helping him get out of his comfort zone, go to new experiences in high school, and the two of them were just having an amazing time together. Now, Yoshi was a rugby player back in Japan, but this time he wanted to experience something new. So instead of signing up to play rugby, Yoshi decided to sign up for a jazz dance class. And he absolutely loved this dance class. He was having so much fun trying something different, and his host mom, Holly, even found him a bike that had lights on it, and she gave him the bike, she gave him a helmet, so that he could use the bike to ride to his dance classes. Everything seemed to be going great, but in mid-August, Yoshi and Webb were hosting a party at the Haymaker's house with a couple of friends from high school. They were having a pool party, so people were jumping in the pool, people were playing games, and at one point, Webb decided to dive into the pool. Unfortunately, he dove into a shallow spot, which immediately sent him into the intensive care unit at the hospital. He had a broken neck, and Holly and Richard didn't know whether their son would walk again, and it was just a very difficult time for the family. But thankfully, Webb was able to receive the treatment that he needed, and he was on his way home to make a full physical recovery. The Haymakers were extremely happy that their son was okay, but unfortunately, unknown to them, things were about to get unimaginably worse. A month later, in September of 1992, Holly took Webb and Yoshi to a blues festival. And as usual, Yoshi was being very social, and immediately he was making friends left and right. He ended up meeting another student at McKinley High School who was also an exchange student and was also Japanese. So the two of them got to talking, and the girl ended up inviting Webb and Yoshi to a Halloween party that her host family was hosting for other exchange students. And Yoshi was so excited about this. It was going to be a costume party, so he was so excited to dress up, pick out a costume, and just enjoy his first ever American Halloween party. So on Saturday, October 17th, 1992, Yoshi and Webb were at home getting ready for their Halloween party. Yoshi had been watching a lot of John Travolta movies, so he decided that for Halloween, he was going to dress up as Tony from the movie Saturday Night Fever. He even rented a white tuxedo, he wore black pants, a ruffled white shirt, and he was also carrying a camera, which he liked to bring around to take candid photos. As for Webb, he was still injured from his diving accident, so he was still wearing his neck brace, and he decided to use it as part of his costume. He was going to dress up as an accident victim, so he wore the neck brace, he put on a few bandages for effect, and that was it. Neither one of them were wearing a scary mask, they weren't wearing fake blood, they weren't carrying like a fake weapon. Their costumes were pretty simple and really not that scary. After getting all of their costumes put together, Yoshi and Webb were ready to head off to the Halloween party. Since the boys were going to be out that night, Richard and Holly decided that they were going to have their own little date night and were going to go to the movies. So since they weren't going to drive the boys to the Halloween party, Richard told Webb that he could drive the family car, and he even wrote down the directions as to how to get to the party. Now remember, back then, Google did not exist, iPhones did not exist, so people had to literally depend on like physical maps to get around. They had to depend on themselves and just hope that they would get to the right address. So Richard writes down the address, he gives it to Webb, and then the two of them head off to the Halloween party. The girl's house was located in the central area of Baton Rouge, and Webb wasn't too familiar with this side of town, so he wasn't sure if he was even going in the right direction. The girl's address was 10131 East Brookside. So as a pair were making their way to the party, they got to the right street and they found a house that said 10311. Again, they were supposed to go to 101, but instead they stopped at house 103. The reason Webb slowed down at this house is because it was covered in Halloween decorations, so it looked like someone was hosting a Halloween party there, plus there were a couple of cars parked in the driveway, so he just figured that these cars were from people attending the party.
And we saw the house, and we saw a house, and the address was close, and they had 3 cars in the driveway, and Halloween decorations all around. So we thought the S would probably be the place.
So Webb parks a car, and then him and Yoshi get out and start walking towards the front door. And this is all happening at around 8:15 p.m. on a Saturday night. The pair get to the front door, they ring the doorbell, and then they wait for a few seconds, but no one comes out to greet them. They thought this was weird, so they started walking back to their car, and Webb just figured that they were at the wrong house. Meanwhile, inside the house, a woman named Bonnie Pierce is peering at the boys through their side door window. She quickly opened the door to see what was happening, and that's when she saw Webb, who to her appeared to be an injured person because of his costume, and then she sees Yoshi, who was standing a little ahead of Webb, walking towards her. At this point, Bonnie says that she was scared. She didn't know what these boys wanted, she didn't know why they were at her house, and she says that she feared for her life. So she slams the door shut, she locks the door, and then she walks over to her husband Rodney, who was sitting in the living room couch, and tells him, "Go get your gun." Now going back to Webb and Yoshi's perspective, they saw Bonnie peering out of the side door and then slamming it shut and then running away. Now they thought this was weird, like why is this lady acting so scared? Why isn't she telling us if the party's here? They were just confused as to why she was behaving this way. But again, Webb just figured, this is probably the wrong house, so he was trying to tell Yoshi like, let's get out of here, let's get back in the car. But as he was explaining this to Yoshi, they hear someone open the side door once again. So they look over to the side door and they were expecting to see the woman standing there. But no, this time a man was standing there holding a .44 Magnum revolver. Webb immediately noticed the weapon and realized that this was a dangerous situation. He tries to tell Yoshi to not go towards the house, to come back, to keep walking, to get out of here. But at this point, Yoshi is facing Rodney, walking towards him and telling him, "We're here for the party, we're here for the party," in a very happy and excited tone. Now Yoshi had lost one of his contact lenses a few days earlier, so on this particular night he was not wearing his lenses, which meant that he didn't really see that well. So in his mind, Webb is thinking, oh my goodness, Yoshi doesn't see that this man is holding a weapon, and he doesn't realize that this is a real weapon. At that time, guns were not common in Japan. So maybe Yoshi did see the weapon, maybe he figured that this was just part of a Halloween costume, maybe he figured that it was a prop. He probably didn't understand that this was a serious situation. So after Yoshi yells, "We're here for the party," Rodney replies back saying, "Freeze." It's believed that Yoshi didn't understand the slang word freeze. He didn't understand that that meant to stop and not continue walking towards Rodney. So unfortunately, that's what he did. He continued walking towards Rodney, and once he was 5 feet away from him, Rodney fired his weapon and shot Yoshi in the chest. Then he walked back inside his house and slammed the door shut. Yoshi fell to the ground and he was still conscious, but he was crying because of the pain. Webb immediately ran over him to check his wounds, and once he realized how serious they were, he ran over to a neighbor's house and asked for help. The neighbor, Stan, immediately told his wife to call 911, and then he ran over to Yoshi to help him. He elevated Yoshi's legs and he told Webb to keep applying pressure to the wound. Now at this point, Stan did not know that his neighbor Rodney was the one that shot this young boy. So he starts yelling over to Rodney and Bonnie's house, telling them to come outside, to call the police, and to help. But instead of going outside to check on the situation, Bonnie just yells back, "Go away." Now granted, they did call the police inside the house, but they didn't come outside to check on the situation. They didn't come outside to, see how Yoshi was. So unfortunately, the ambulance did not arrive until 40 minutes later. Once the paramedics arrived to the scene, they checked Yoshi's wounds and then rushed him to the hospital. The bullet had pierced an upper and lower lobe of Yoshi's left lung and had exited through an area of his ribs. Then, sometime between 8:48 p.m. and 8:49 p.m., while en route to the hospital, he died in the ambulance due to blood loss. Meanwhile, across town, the Haymakers had just finished watching the movie The Last of the Mohicans. And this movie was pretty violent, so as they were leaving the movie theater, Holly told her husband, "It's great that this country isn't as violent as that anymore." After this, Holly's pager goes off, so she goes to call the number, and it was the police. An officer on the other end of the phone tells her that her son Webb is fine, but that Yoshi is not. Holly tells the officer, yes, what hospital do I go to? I'll meet you at the hospital. But the officer tells her that that won't be necessary. So Richard and Holly race over to the police station, and when they walk inside, they see Webb just sitting on a bench alone. The first words out of his mouth were, "Mom, what happens when someone is shot in the chest?" And Holly told him, "Well, sometimes people survive. Sometimes they don't. Yoshi didn't." And immediately Webb put his hands over his head, he began crying, and he said, "His poor mom." As for Yoshi's family, when his mother heard the news, she went to Yoshi's childhood bedroom, sat on the bed, and just cried. Ugh, my heart breaks for Yoshi's family. His mother just seems like such a sweet and wonderful and caring person. I can't even begin to imagine what was going through her mind in that moment. Her son had only been gone for 2 months, and now he was dead. So a few days after the incident, the Hattori family flew to Louisiana to meet with the Haymakers and to prepare their son's body for his funeral. Holly said that she was terrified. She was supposed to take care of their son, and he had died on her watch. So she was really scared and nervous to meet with Yoshi's mother for the first time and to hear what she had to say. But when they finally met in person, the Hattori family wasn't mad at all. The first word out of Mako's mouth was, "How is Webb?" And Holly was immediately taken back. These people had just lost their son, and instead of being angry at the Haymakers and blaming them for their son's death, they were asking them how their own son was and were concerned for him. I feel like that just shows what type of people the Hattori family are. They could have easily blamed Holly and Richard and even Webb, but they knew that this wasn't their fault. The only person responsible for Yoshi's death was the person that pulled the trigger, Rodney Pierce. So let's talk about Rodney. Rodney was a 30-year-old man who worked at a local supermarket as a butcher. His wife was Bonnie Pierce, and the two of them had 2 children together. After the incident, police brought Rodney down to the station for questioning, but they quickly released him and declined to charge him with any crime. The police felt that Rodney had been in his right to shoot a trespasser, so they didn't think that he had done anything wrong. However, the Hattori and the Haymaker family worked with the Louisiana governor, and they also worked with the Japan consulate to push this and pursue Rodney for criminal charges. And it worked. Rodney was indicted by a grand jury and charged with manslaughter. If convicted, he was facing up to 40 years in prison. Rodney offered his and his parents' house as a security for a $100,000 property bond and was released pending the trial. But at this point, news of Yoshi's death was quickly spreading, especially in Japan. The people were shocked with the story and couldn't believe that this young man was killed and that the man responsible for this almost walked free. News reporters traveled all the way from Japan to Louisiana to cover the trial. It was a complete media frenzy. So as people were preparing for the trial to begin, a handful of Rodney's neighbors helped gather donations to put towards a defense fund for Rodney. One of his neighbors, Frank, said, "If folks don't help their neighbors, they're not much." Frank said that this incident consumed Rodney and his family and that they were going to need help with the expenses. He said that this was going to affect their family for the rest of their lives, and that's why he wanted to start this defense fund. Frank even said, "We are sympathetic with the Japanese family as well, but we're just trying to take care of our own." And I don't know, something about the way he said that just rubbed me the wrong way. Anyways, as for Rodney's defense lawyer named Lewis, he said that he also received numerous phone calls from people offering their money and offering their prayers for Rodney. He said that some people wanted to give Rodney money to help pay for this defense attorney, and then other people just wanted to call to express their anger. People were upset that Rodney was even charged in the first place. They couldn't believe that Rodney was actually being charged for manslaughter, and there were even talks of starting a petition to get the indictment thrown out. So it seemed like Rodney had a lot of supporters and that people truly believed that he did nothing wrong and was just trying to defend his home and his family. Now going back to the trial, the jury selection had finally begun. Potential jurors had to fill out a questionnaire that asked the following questions. Have you ever experienced unannounced visitors at your home? How would you rate the safety of your neighborhood? How satisfied are you with current police protection? Have you or anyone in your household ever owned a gun? If yes, what type of weapon and for what purpose? And lastly, do you or anyone in your household support any organization concerned about gun control laws? So potential jurors had to answer this questionnaire, and they also had to hear from both attorneys. Rodney's attorney spoke with the jurors and he asked them if they could set aside their grief for the dead boy and give Pierce a fair trial. He even said, guilt and grief are not the same thing. You're going to hear a lot about grief, but what you have to do here is decide about guilt. And with that, members of the jury were chosen and the trial began. Rodney's defense attorney worked hard to establish his actions that night as self-defense. He even invoked the Castle Doctrine defense, which is when Americans had the right to apply lethal means to protect their homes. Lewis said that Rodney was no killer, he's just another one of your neighbors trying to protect his home and his family. In fact, Lewis even argued that the only reason Rodney acted this way was because of his wife Bonnie's panic. So the lawyers put Bonnie on the stand so that she could tell everyone her side of the story. Bonnie says that when she opened the side door that night, she first noticed Webb, and then all of a sudden a second person, Yoshi, came from around the corner very quickly.
And when I heard the doorbell ring, I got up, put my house coat on, and I went to answer the door. I turned on the porch light and looked out through the blinds.
And within a second or two, something told her that this wasn't right, and she felt fear.
We heard them at the side door because they were clanking the blinds. So we walked towards the side door.
And then I opened the door, and I saw a person. He was all bandaged up, like he'd been in a car wreck. I didn't know what kind of help they needed.
She said that Yoshi was coming towards her very quickly and that in her mind, he was going to hurt her. She specifically said, quote, "I guess he appeared Oriental. He could have been Mexican or whatever."
Then all of a sudden, a second person came from around the corner real fast. And I'd say within a second or two, something just told me this isn't right.
Instinctively,
yes,
you
sir.
felt fear.
Because if someone's running towards you, then it must mean they mean harm.
So that's when she slammed the door shut, ran over to Rodney, and told him to go get the weapon. She says that Rodney didn't even hesitate. He didn't ask her, "Why am I going to get this weapon? What happened? What did you see?" Nothing. Bonnie says that there was no thinking involved in the situation. She wishes that she could have just taken a moment to think about this, to think about what she was telling her husband, about what the consequences of this decision was going to be. But no, she immediately panicked, which of course made her husband panic, and this just created a moment of chaos where nobody was thinking. Nobody was thinking logically that night. Now, as for Rodney's perspective, his attorney also put him on the stand, and he testified that that night, him and his family were getting ready to have dinner, and as they were setting everything up, Bonnie went to the side door and then slammed the door shut. Rodney said that this made him mad. He didn't like it when people slammed the door loudly. So he was a little bit flustered, and he looked over at Bonnie, and that's when she started yelling at him to go get the weapon. He says that he had never seen his wife this panicked before. When he went outside to see what was happening, he said, "It was a person coming from behind the car moving real fast. At that point, I pointed the gun and told him to freeze. But the person kept walking towards me, moving erratically. At that time, I hollered for him to stop. He didn't. He kept moving forward and was laughing." Rodney says that he was so scared to death and thought that this person wasn't going to stop walking and was going to hurt him and his family.
To me, it appeared to be a crazy person. This was not, it was out to do harm.
And looking back on it, what gave you that impression that it could be a madman?
Just the way he moved, it was very strange. It wasn't something that you normally see people do.
He also said that it looked like Yoshi was waving something around in his hand, and that he couldn't see what this object was, but to him, it appeared to be a weapon. But it wasn't. It was Yoshi's camera. Rodney had confused the camera with a gun. He said, "I had no choice. I want Yoshi's parents to understand that I'm sorry for everything."
It was terror. I could see this fear that I'd never seen before, and actually her telling me to go get the gun.
Why didn't you just call the police? Did that thought enter your mind?
No, I didn't. At that time, it did not enter my mind.
So a couple of neighbors and a few other character witnesses went on the stand and testified saying that Rodney was an amazing person. He was a good husband, a good neighbor, a good father, and that he would never do anything like this. However, when it was time for the district attorney to plead his case, he told the jurors that Rodney's character was not on trial, and that even though people described him as a wonderful husband, father, friend, neighbor, that doesn't matter. What matters is the behavior that Rodney had the night that he killed Yoshi. Yoshi. The district attorney Doug said that it was not reasonable for Rodney, a 6'2", well-armed man, to be so scared of a friendly, unarmed, 130-pound boy who simply rang the doorbell. Doug said that even if Yoshi was walking towards him in a quick way, Rodney was not justified in using deadly force. All Yoshi and Webb were doing was ringing the doorbell, and as soon as they realized that they were at the wrong house, they started walking away. It's not like they tried to break in the door. It's not like they were trying to peek through the windows. They didn't go in the backyard to try to break in. Doug believes that Rodney and Bonnie had a handful of choices they could have made before getting the weapon. For example, they could have stayed inside the house, called the police, and have them dealt with the situation. Even so, when Bonnie first came running in telling him to grab the weapon, Rodney could have taken a moment to step back and ask her, why? Why do I need my weapon? What did you see out there? Why are you so scared? But no, they didn't do any of that. During the trial, Doug asked Rodney, did you hear anyone trying to break in the front door? Rodney said, no, sir. Well, did you hear anyone trying to break into the side door? No, sir. I know you're sorry you killed him. You are sorry, aren't you? Yes, sir. But you did kill him, didn't you? And Rodney says, yes, sir. The trial lasted 7 days, and when it was time for deliberation, the jury only deliberated for 3 hours. And when the verdict was announced, the courtroom spectators broke into applause. The jury had found Rodney Pierce not guilty and acquitted him of all charges. Rodney was a free man. After the verdict was read, Rodney was visibly shaking and crying and said, I'm very sorry. He told the press that he never wanted to own a gun ever again. The Pierce family eventually moved out of their house, and I believe they even left town.
The jury believed Rodney's decision made sense.
That was their property. They own that. They have the right to protect it. They have the right to go outside the door anytime they want to.
Now, Yoshi's father, Mesa, had attended all 7 days of the trial, which, as you can imagine, was incredibly difficult. He had to sit there every single day listening to Rodney and to Bonnie and his defense attorney describe Yoshi as a hyperactive Japanese exchange student who was moving in an extremely unusual way. It was just a lot to go through, but thankfully the Haymaker family was there supporting the Hattori family every step of the way. And when the verdict was read, the Hattori and the Haymaker family were actually not inside the courtroom. They had gone outside to have a quick walk, to take in some fresh air. Hearing the news outside of the courtroom, Richard says that he went into a state of shock. He couldn't believe that Rodney was going to walk away free. It was crazy, and Webb felt the same way. He felt that Rodney's attorney, Lewis, had made Yoshi out to be this scary and dangerous boy, when that's not at all who he was. He says that he felt so numb and flustered when he heard the verdict. And as for Yoshi's father, Mesa, he says that he was so saddened by the verdict and he felt like his son died in vain. As I mentioned earlier, the trial was a media frenzy. A handful of reporters from Japan were covering the trial, and once the verdict was read, the story became top news on the morning radio and TV in Japan. The shooting of Yoshi was known there as the freeze case, and people were shocked at the verdict. They felt that one of the reasons Rodney was acquitted is because the American society is obsessed with guns, and it just confirmed the stereotypes that some Japanese people held about the United States. To some people, this case made it seem like America was this savage and paranoid place where people are so scared of each other that they feel the need to have guns to protect them. People didn't understand why this man, Rodney, decided to shoot and kill an unarmed young boy. A magazine in Japan even wrote an article that said, "How to avoid being killed in America." Some of the tips they gave in this article were, you should form friendships with locals and learn their survival skills. Go native in appearance, which means males should grow facial hair as it will make them look more Hispanic. You should also carry your money in 2 different places, so in case you're robbed, you'll have another stash. And lastly, under no circumstances should you put up resistance against an armed robber. Now, I do believe that some of this article was sarcasm, and it was supposed to be kind of like funny, how to avoid being killed in America. So I think it was a little bit sarcastic, but I feel like this is an example that shows how some people in Japan thought of America in that time. TV networks even took the time during their national news program to offer a lesson about the English word freeze. They explained to people that the word freeze can be used to mean don't move or I'll shoot. Which again, a lot of people believe that Yoshi's failure to understand the slang word freeze is part of what led him to his death. As for Yoshi's family, their fight for justice did not end at the trial. Meiko, his mother, says that she had a vivid dream on the plane ride back to Japan in which Yoshi told her that she should compose a petition urging Americans to remove guns from their household. So, on that plane ride, Meiko got to work and started making plans to launch a campaign. Then, as soon as they landed in Japan, Meiko and Mesa launched their campaign to call for an end to easy access to firearms in the U.S. Their petition quickly gathered support, and in the end, 1.7 million people signed the petition.
7 days after my son's death, we began the petition drive for handgun control in the United States. Today, to Washington, D.C., we bring 1.7 million signatures collected in Japan. We started the petition because we love America just as Yoshi did.
Meanwhile, the Haymakers were back in the United States and they were supporting the Hattori family as much as they could. Richard eventually quit his job to support the cause and he ended up gathering over 150,000 signatures. Now again, this is a time period before email, before iPhones, before social media. So Richard gathered all of these signatures by writing letters to people and by speaking to them over the phone.
Both petitions were written from the heart in the aftermath of Yoshi's death. Both are addressed to the president, but they really are speaking to the American people through their president. Their petition is a plea to Americans to find a way out of this arms race.
Richard said that his first goal was to get the petition moving, then go to Washington, and then finally set an appointment to meet with the President of the United States. And Richard accomplished this goal. In July of 1993, President Bill Clinton called the Hattori family to offer his condolences for their son's death. Then, a few months later, in November, the Hattori and the Haymaker family traveled to Washington, D.C. and met with the president in person at the White House. President Clinton spoke with both families in the Oval Office, and the Hattori said that they felt very welcome. They felt like Clinton actually cared about what happened to their son, like he actually cared about what they were trying to do. The goal of this meeting was to get Clinton to reassess the easy access to firearms in the U.S. Meiko said, "The life of my son will never be back, but I don't want his death to be in vain. I don't want to see more agony. I like America very much. This is why we are working for this endeavor." So the meeting with the president went well, and just a few weeks after meeting with the family, President Clinton signed into law the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, which mandated background checks on gun buyers and a 5-day waiting period on all purchases. As soon as this bill was signed, the U.S. ambassador to Japan traveled all the way to Nagoya, met with the Hattori family in person, showed them a copy of the bill, and told them that they were a big reason as to why this bill was passed. Now, the bill was not the end to the Hattori's fight. They decided to launch a civil lawsuit against Rodney Pierce and his home insurance company. During the trial, the Hattori's family attorney emphasized that Yoshi's skin color played a role in the shooting, and they even reminded the court that when Bonnie testified during the criminal trial, she had said, "I guess he appeared Oriental. He could have been Mexican or whatever," basically showing that this might have been racially motivated.
But Holly and others think there may have been a reason. Perhaps Bonnie was startled to see a minority outside her home.
I have often wished that we'd had a French boy or a Norwegian boy, because I'm not so sure that that boy would have been shot.
In what way? Do you think it contributed to her fear?
Yeah.
Looking outside and seeing an unfamiliar face?
Yeah, she said, "I knew he was darker than me."
I mean, why weren't they scared of Webb? Webb was also there. He was also ringing the doorbell.
Now think of what happened. The moment Bonnie saw Webb, she thought nothing was unusual. She then saw Yoshi, and within a half a second, the door was slammed and "Get your gun" was said.
So the attorney just doesn't really understand why Yoshi was the only one that was shot. It's not like they had scary costumes on. He was literally dressed like John Travolta, so they didn't have any fake blood, no scary mask, nothing. Now, I'm not sure how long the trial lasted, but in the end, the judge ruled that self-defense was not acceptable and that there was no justification whatsoever that killing Yoshi was necessary for Rodney to save himself. The judge found Rodney and his homeowner's insurance liable to Yoshi's family for $650,000 in damages. After the legal fees and whatnot, the Hattori family was paid $100,000. And the Hattori family ended up using this money to start 2 charitable funds in Yoshi's name. They created the Yoshihiro Hattori Memorial Fund, which is a scholarship designed to promote intercultural understanding and peace. It allows high school students to travel to Japan as an exchange student. Their hope is that recipients of this award will travel, study, and leave a positive mark on the world in the spirit of Yoshi, and also to encourage friendship with people of the United States. I read an article that was from 2016, and the article stated that so far, 25 students had benefited from this scholarship. So I'm sure now in 2022, that number has gone up. When I was doing my research about the scholarship, I came across this blog post from a girl named Paris. Paris was a recipient of the Yoshihiro Memorial Fund, and she was writing about her experience going to Japan. Paris said that she knew what happened to Yoshi before she applied for the scholarship, and that to her it just seemed like a tragic story. But when she finally traveled to Japan, walked inside Yoshi's home, met with his family, walked inside his bedroom, looked at his clothes, looked at his photos on the wall, everything just became real to her. She realized that Yoshi was a real person, and that the only reason she was even in Japan was because of him. Paris said that Yoshi's family was absolutely wonderful, and they were so kind. They showed her special photos of Yoshi, and this just inspired her to share her story and let people know that yes, this actually happened and Yoshi is a real person. I feel like when we're listening to true crime, we can forget that these are real people involved. This isn't just a story. Yoshi was real. He was someone's son. He was someone's brother, someone's friend, someone's cousin. Everything that happened to him and to the Hattori family was real. So it was a really interesting blog post, but I will link that down below, and I will also link the website to the Memorial Fund in case you guys want to read more about it. And you can also make a donation if you would like to. I went ahead and made a donation on behalf of the familia because I just really wanted to help out. I know how important this memorial fund is to Yoshi's family, so it's important to help keep it going. Now, what happened to Yoshi was actually fictionalized on a TV show called Homicide: Life on the Street. In this episode called Colors, a cousin of a detective shoots a Turkish exchange student who goes to the wrong house on Halloween. In this episode, they made Yoshi and Webb's characters dress up as members from the band Kiss. In the show, they tried to determine a motive, and in the end, this incident was portrayed as being motivated by racism.
The deceased's name is Hikmet Gersel, Gersel, 17 years old, exchange student from Turkey. The owner of the house thought he was a burglar, shot him.
Where is this homeowner?
Inside. I got him and his wife in separate rooms, plus a friend of this kid. The friend says they were going to a party and got the wrong address.
You told us that you said to Hikmet, get away from here, get away from my house, and finally get away. Were these the only words you said to him?
No, I'm sure I said a lot more, like, what do you want?
And Hikmet, did he respond to that?
He was muttering away. I couldn't understand him.
Did you know he was speaking in a foreign language?
For all I know, the guy was on PCP.
Yoshi's death was also covered in an episode of the Justice Files. You can find the full episode on YouTube. It's divided into 3 parts, and it was a really interesting documentary to watch. You get to hear firsthand from the Haymakers. You get to hear from Webb. You get to hear from the attorneys assigned to the case. You also get to hear from Rodney and Bonnie and their side of the story. It was a very informative documentary, but if you guys do watch it, I do just want to warn you that they do include a photo of Yoshi's body after he was deceased. I wasn't expecting to see that. Like, I was just watching the documentary and then all of a sudden his photo with his wounds and everything just popped up. So if that does trigger you and you are sensitive to that, just be careful watching the documentary. Oh, and also there was another documentary called The Shot Heard Around the World. I believe this documentary came out in 1997. I was trying to find clips of it and I was trying to find a way to watch it, but it's literally impossible. I don't know how you can watch this documentary, but I was able to include a tiny preview of it, which I will try to insert here or I will link it down below. In the documentary, they covered the trial, they covered the investigation. You can even hear the 911 call that Bonnie made to police the night that Yoshi was killed. It's crazy because at the time, this case had so much national coverage, but I literally had never heard about this case until recently. It honestly doesn't have that much coverage, and I feel like people should not forget about what happened to Yoshi. Now, as for the Haymakers, Holly and Richard said that they will always consider Yoshi to be their son, and they think of the Hattoris as extended family. Unfortunately, I did read that this year Webb passed away. I believe he was 40 years old, and just reading that broke my heart. Webb was their only child, so not only had they lost their host son, but they also lost their real son. I don't know, just reading that really broke my heart, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the Haymaker family. I am so sorry for the loss of your son. I just truly hope that they are doing okay. Now, as for the Hattori family, wow, I just don't even know where to begin. Yoshi's parents are incredibly strong. They lost their son in such a senseless way, and since then, they have been fighting for justice and trying to make the world a better place. My heart breaks for them, and it's just very unfair that this happened. Yoshi had only been in the United States for 2 months. All he was trying to do was learn English, gain new friendships, experience life, and, because he knocked on the wrong door, his life was cut short. He was only 16 years old. He had so much to live for, and I'm so sorry that he never got to experience more. My thoughts and prayers go out to the Hattori family, and I want to end the video on this quote from Yoshi's dad. He said, "Sometimes I feel like he's still in America. I say to myself, someday he'll come back home." Alright, you guys, that's pretty much all the information I have for today's video. This case was very emotional. His dream was always to come to America to study and just live life, and unfortunately, he was only here for 2 months and then it was cut so short. I don't know, I would love to know what you guys think about this case, so definitely let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, please make sure to go check out the Yoshihiro Memorial Scholarship Fund. I will link it down below, and just continue to help by sharing his story, bringing awareness to this, and I just truly hope that his family has found peace and that they're doing well. Alright, you guys, thank you so much for being here and listening to Yoshihiro's story. I truly appreciate it, and before you guys leave, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and also hit the notification button so you can be notified about future videos. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys!